export and to find their next business abroad. We attract foreign direct investment, and we are the protocol office. So just to remind everybody, this has been more than a year when we hosted the Ambassador Dermer in Minnesota, and that was the beginning of what we called, exploring new partnerships. And in this case, it was Minnesota and Israel. It was followed up by the team attending Biomed, Sarah Warbert, as Steve Riddle was mentioning, and then WATEC with Steve Riddle at the head, just to bring Minnesota companies to Israel and see the different opportunities that they were there. July has been particularly intense with our relationship with Israel. We have organized several different webinars, but also we had a virtual pitch on startups, on clean tech and ag tech that we did virtually. This year it was part of Select USA events, and out of the three final companies that were just presenting their projects, two of them were from Israel. Again, that shows the amount of work that we're doing with Israel, the interest that there is from Minnesota to Israel and from Israel to Minnesota. And, are we surprised that there were two Israel companies in the end? Well, we were not surprised. So with that, thank you very much for all the attendees to come and be part of our efforts with Israel. Thank you very much to the speakers again for allowing us to continue our work and our initiatives. Thank you to the team for doing such a great job on making sure that we highlight that relationship. And I just wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabrielle, and thanks for the reminder that we had such a great visit with Ambassador Dermer last year. We hosted him and introduced him to Governor Waltz. We had such a fantastic gathering. Israel was really in the spotlight for a while, so we're really grateful for that. So next, I would like to invite Ariella Rada to say a few words. Ariella is the Consul for Academic and Community Affairs at the Consulate in Chicago. Ariella has helped our office on other occasions before we went to WATEC. She did come up and visit us in the winter. We made sure that she could enjoy Minnesota's winter. We deliberately scheduled it in the coldest month so she could come and see us then. Ariella, we're hoping to bring you back in person to Minnesota again sometime, but we're glad that you can join us this morning and are grateful that you can say a few words of welcome. Ariella Rada, good morning.
Good morning, Steve. Good morning, everybody. Thank you. Of course, I hope that all of you are staying safe and healthy during this challenging times. As you mentioned, I greatly enjoyed my visit to Minnesota in 2019, even though it was in the middle of winter and I have never been cold that much in my entire life, especially growing up in the desert of Israel. But it was a great experience for me. On behalf of the consulate, I want to express our appreciation to our, of course, good friend, Steve Riddle. Thank you for everything that you do. And Gabriel Jarbo, and all the team, and also Andrea Yona, and everybody that she is, of course, the East Coast and Midwest representative of BIRD for organizing this webinar. I also want to congratulate John Lalte, the representative of the U.S. recipients of the BIRD grant, and Yaakov Gorboy, that is the Israeli representative. And I look forward to their presentation. Besides having a great team at the Minnesota Trade Office, the state itself is home base for a number of international corporations. We also appreciate the involvement of a very active Jewish community, such as the Minnesota-Israel Chamber of Commerce, and of course the JCRC led by Steve Hungs and his colleagues, all of them being great partners. It is most appropriate for us, of course, that BIRD selected the state of Minnesota for this webinar. And there is no doubt at all that there are tremendous opportunities in the sectors which BIRD founding supports. In the consulate's 9-state Midwest region, our economic team, which I lead, is always on the lookout for U.S. prospects for partnership with Israeli companies and institutions. Our main goal is, of course, to leverage our resources to make connection to bring both Americans and Israelis together to explore possible joint ventures. One excellent example that I would like to mention briefly of Israel-Minnesota cooperation resulting from visiting Israel is the Minnesota world-known Mayo Clinic, who signed an MOU with the Israel Innovation Authority in 2019 during the Israel Biomed conference. Hopefully, that similar partnership will be inspired by today's webinar, and I have no doubt that that will happen. And of course, the consulate will always be happy to work with the Minnesota Trade Office and BIRD to make that happen. So thank you, or in Hebrew, toda rabah, for the opportunity to speak to all of you today. And I'm sure that we're going to enjoy the program. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you to Ariella. Wonderful words from you. Thanks for the reminder that the Mayo Clinic picked Israel as a partner. The reason that's significant is everybody wants to partner with the Mayo Clinic. The Mayo Clinic is one of the world's premier medical institutions. They have a lot of countries to choose from, but they chose Israel. This speaks really highly of Israel's incredible medical innovation sector. They're doing a wonderful job. So thank you. So next, it's my pleasure to introduce the Director of Business Development, BIRD Foundation US East Coast Midwest, Andrea Yona. Andrea and I have gotten to know each other virtually over the past month or so, getting to know the BIRD Foundation, actually making a few introductions of BIRD directly to some of the Minnesota companies that have gotten a head start in looking at whether BIRD is for them. It's been a lot of fun. We've had a couple companies express very keen interest. One of them has actually submitted an executive summary for a pending proposal. I am crossing my fingers they'll actually follow through. So the point is that you're next. Those of you on the call this morning, tune in, pay attention. This is an unusual opportunity, and Andrea is the right partner for this. In all of my calls, I've been so impressed with how plugged in she is to Israel's technology sector. You don't worry about using some technical jargon. She'll keep up with you. And then she will help find the Israeli partners that matter to you and your specific technology. I see John smiling. I think that's a sign he agrees with me, which is great. So, and he nods his head, absolutely. So Andrea, we're so grateful that you picked Minnesota today to tell us a little bit more about BIRD. So I'll turn it over to you for the main presentation. Good morning, Andrea.
Good morning and good afternoon in Israel to everyone joining us. Thank you so much, Steve. Steve and I have become friends. Thanks to the state of Minnesota for hosting this. The BIRD Foundation is really all about mutual benefit. So that goes for this webinar for mutual benefit for not only for the companies, but for the state of Minnesota and the state of Israel. So thank you, Steve and Gabriella and Ariella from the consulate, and of course our U.S. and Israeli company, both John and Yaakov for joining us and spending the time as well. So BIRD it's actually an acronym, nothing to do with birds, not quite a foundation. It is more like a federally funded research and development program between the United States and Israel. The acronym is Binational Industrial Research and Development. Next, please. The fund has been around for a very long time. So we're 42 years old and started with both countries looking to promote joint innovation and technology through projects between U.S. and Israeli companies. We read that the fund is also between the U.S. and Israel, and each gave $55 million to start this $110 million endowment. And we not only bring companies together, but we actually fund their projects. Next, please. We fund these projects up to 50%, in fact, of their joint budgets. It is supported, like I said, by both countries, and we have a board of governors that reflects that. So you'll see we have people on the U.S. side through from the NIST, from the Department of Commerce, the Department of State and Treasury, and similar government ministries on the Israeli side. So it's equal from both governments. Next, please. So the way that the model works is we fund up to 50% and to a maximum of $1 million in each project. And we approve for our general cycles about 20 projects a year. And about 1,000 projects since a little more since we first started. So it's a risk sharing mechanism. So Bird is putting in up to 50% or up to $1 million, and the companies are are matching that dollar for dollar with their own money. So typically we're seeing about $2 million joint project budgets, of which we can put in up to $1 million. And these are typically about 18 to 24 month projects. Next slide, please. So we invest in all industry sectors with the exception only of military specific military applications. But everything else in this chart certainly changes as new technology sectors become more prevalent. You'll see we do a lot with energy, water, environment, life sciences, energy, homeland security and cyber, and many others. Next, please. So throughout the years, from that $110 million, we now have invested over $360 million, 1,000 projects. In fact, from the repayments from the successful projects, we're now at over what we actually received. And most importantly, $10 billion have been shown in some economic impact studies done that was either directly or indirectly related to all of the projects that we funded. Next slide, please. So when we talk about the $10 billion, it's important to identify what does that come from? So it's not just, let's say, the repayment from the successful projects, but it's more importantly, all of the sales that the companies have generated for themselves and the jobs created, the follow-on investment from projects approved, M&A, Israeli companies setting up operations in the United States, and also U.S. companies opening R&D centers in Israel, and obviously export. Next, please. So our upcoming call for proposals starts with September 1st with the submission of an executive summary. This is what the call for proposals looks like. It's also on our website. We review them, we give feedback on them. Those that submit full-scale proposals will do so by October 14th. And then we'll be approving all projects in mid-December. Projects are evaluated through technical expert evaluators through the NIST on the U.S. side and through the Innovation Authority in Israel on the Israeli side. Next slide, please. So yeah, so these are the two general cycles every year. The first of every year starts in March and ends in June, and then the second, which is our upcoming one, starts in September and ends in December. Next, please. We also have once a year an energy cycle. Now this one just passed, but we've had it every year since 2007. It works the same way. It's a third cycle. The only difference is that this is extra appropriated funding that came through the U.S. Department of Energy and the Israeli Ministry of Energy together with the Innovation Authority. It focuses only on alternative renewable energies, as well as water energy nexus and gas-related technologies. The companies that are moving forward in this cycle will be submitting their proposals in August, and we'll be making those selections in November. The only other difference is that a university or research institution can participate as a partner, whereas in our regular cycle, both partners should be commercial entities. Next, please. And finally, we have a cycle that's almost, that's really coming up soon, specific to Homeland Security. Again, it's a separate cycle funded by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security together with the Israeli Ministry of Public Security, also with the Innovation Authority, and it's focusing only on technologies specific to Homeland Security and first responders. I don't want to go into that too much. That's upcoming, but again, it's once a year. And just so you know, all energy and Homeland Security related topics can also submit to our general cycle. Next, please. So what are we looking for in our in bird related projects? So we want to see high level of innovation. Next, you can actually go through all of the points. We want to see good synergy between the companies, good market up, that they can really show that they have, they understand the market and they can quantify it. And very important that they have a good commercialization strategy, and at least one of the two has been able to sell before and has experience or distribution channels to get to market. Next, please. So why do companies come to Bird? I mean, we've had large companies like GE, Honeywell, actually out of Minnesota, and many others, as well as smaller companies. So why do these companies come to Bird? One, surprisingly, even large companies do need the funding. This is risk sharing, and especially on technologies that are more risky. And it's actually a risk sharing mechanism, like I said, between the countries, between the companies. The validation, or what we call a stamp of approval, is extremely important. It allows smaller companies that are receiving this funding, after they receive this validation, to go ahead and raise additional capital. And it's also helped for marketing purposes for some of the larger companies to show that the two states are actually approving their technologies. And finally, it's the commitment of both of the countries and the companies that kind of brings this technology to market faster than perhaps it would otherwise. Next, please. So you can see these are many of our grantees. As I said, these are a lot of the larger companies because you can recognize their logos. But as I said, it's important for all companies and all types of partnerships to join together and to bring value. Next, please. And finally, these are some of the projects. We've had 15 projects with the state of Minnesota. Hopefully through this webinar and through Steve's great work in reaching out to companies, we can bring many more and let's bring this funding to Minnesota-Israel partnerships and all of the advantages that come along with that. Next, please. Yeah, so with that, I say thank you. I'm happy to now introduce John Laletta. He is the CEO and CTO of Exactor. He'll be followed by his partner at Razor Labs, Yaakov Gorovoy, who will speak about Exactor's part. I have to say that this is a great project. It's a real good example of Bird, because it started with our executive director visiting the state of Ohio, meeting John. John will probably tell you more about that. And the Bird Foundation actually introducing Exactor to Razor Labs. So with that, my 10 minutes are up, and I'm happy to pass it on to John. John, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Andrea. It's really a pleasure to be here. We've been so pleased with our association with Bird and now our association with Razor Labs, our partner in our project. I haven't had a chance to get to Israel. I've been invited a couple of times, but I did get a chance to meet the Bird people in Washington, D.C. I was invited to the Israeli embassy, which was quite a treat for me, and got to spend time at the embassy and have a delightful reception. And then when I went back to my hotel, it turned out all the people from Israel were staying there with me. And so we spent the evening having a great time with cocktails and stories about our countries and our projects. So it's just been a wonderful association. We developed our project when we learned about the Bird program and the focus they had on energy. we started by thinking about what needs to change for the electric grid and how we could participate in that change. The part of the electric grid that most of us think about is power on, power off, and power outages that occur, and the economic impact of that on the country. But there's also, and that's called reliability. But there's also a need to evaluate the resilience of the grid. What happens to the grid after a big storm, an ice storm or a rainstorm or snow or wind? And what happens when load patterns change like they are now? And there's no way to really evaluate that. So we put our heads together and came up with sensors to evaluate how the grid changes when outside influences impact the grid. And now we're just beginning our pilot program where we're deploying our sensors. Next slide, please. Our project is successful because of tremendous partnerships that we've developed. As part of the project, Razor Labs, who will be speaking next, began their work on artificial intelligence and machine learning just recently, as our data now is flowing from our pilot project, which I'll explain to you in a moment. But we've also had other collaborators come into the program to help our project be successful. One of them is Tomorrow Lab. They're in Manhattan, and they're actually designed the packaging for our sensor that we mount on garbage trucks. And the garbage trucks roam around the city continuously and pick up data on the grid with our sensors. And then we formed a relationship with Bright Energy Innovators in Warren, Ohio, and they're helping us in a number of ways. They're doing analytical tests on our batteries, so we can project how long the battery in our sensor will last in various conditions. And we also opened up a maintenance depot at the Bright offices. Bright is somewhat of an incubator for energy projects, one of the few in the country. And so we've had just, with all the support, we've had a very successful initiation of our project. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we developed a sensor that goes on garbage trucks. And the garbage trucks are a perfect model for collecting data on the electric grid. Think about the garbage trucks moving around continuously throughout all the neighborhoods of a city, and then they repeat that motion every week. So the opportunity to collect very rich, deep data over a period of years is now possible. Next slide, please. We had a lot of technical challenges to overcome. We had to build a sensor that can withstand the environment of riding on top of these huge trucks and the heavy vibration and so on. We had to make it so that we could run off a battery. So there's no alteration to the truck. Just simply put the sensor on top of the truck and let the trucks go and start collecting data. Next slide, please. Here's our first deployment on the left and what the new sensor looks like on the right. A bit smaller than the first ones that we've deployed, but just think about this. If you put a sensor on all 60,000 solid waste trucks in the United States, you would be able to evaluate continuously the grid in the United States without any extra fuel being spent, without any resources being added, simply just deploying the sensors. And the sensors are interesting the way they attach to the trucks. Think of a big command strip. We went to 3M, and 3M helped us develop a material that allows the sensor to simply be glued onto the top of the truck. It won't come off even if it's hit by branches, by trees, and so on. But with a little alcohol, a rubbing alcohol, you can take the sensor back off the truck if you need to. So if we had all the trucks in the United States with our sensors on them, and I hope someday we will, who could use that data and what would they use it for? That's the exciting what ifs of our project. Next slide, please. Our first deployment is in Akron, Ohio. 5,000 miles of grid over 65 square miles of city. The mayor of Akron is excited about the project, and he plans on using the data for economic development purposes, showing how his city is both measured on how resilient their grid is and how their grid is managed well by their utility, First Energy, and how those two people or those two organizations come together to attract industry to their region. I mentioned the University of Akron here, who was our research partner. And when we developed our sensor, we had to take very power-hungry algorithms that run on computers that we've used in our company for over a decade to do our work and measure how the grid performs. And we had to integrate those into silicon. And to do that, we needed new algorithms with new opportunities, and the University of Akron Research Department helped us complete that. So we have now a smart city initiative, a grid management initiative, and a smart sensor initiative, all rolled into this one project that is launched in Akron. Next slide, please. This shows a few of the early days of data gathering, and you can see on the top picture where the trucks leave the depot at the very top of the map and then head out to their respective areas of garbage collection, where you get the dense boxes below them. And those boxes represent how densely the city is evaluated. That's just one truck on one day. So the whole city is evaluated in that way. And we're picking up partial discharge emissions from deteriorated equipment on the grid. And we're going to study, with Razor Labs' help, how those discharges change as the grid is affected by outside influences. We get the location of the discharge emissions, the date and time the truck was there. We pick up the environmental data, temperature, pressure, and humidity. We're looking at air particulate contamination. And all of this will go into neural networks being developed by Razor Labs for grid loading, weather events, air quality events, and so on, to develop this measure of this very dynamic organism, the electric grid. Next slide, please. So what I'd like to do is have you experience what's going on in Akron, and you can do that by clicking on that link. And I think we're going to try showing you this movie and see if we can get it to play for everyone. We'll just watch it, and unfortunately the sound isn't coming across. I'll narrate just a little bit. So we're introducing the fact that in Ohio, we're doing this work with these amazing garbage trucks. They're so huge, and the way they carry our sensors allows us to evaluate the electric grid. And there we are putting sensors on the garbage trucks and letting the garbage trucks map the entire city of Akron as they pick up their solid waste at everyone's home. Our technology evaluates deteriorated equipment on the grid. And with doing that, and now with Razor Labs' help on the machine learning side of this, we hope to develop forecasting models for electric utilities that will show them financial benefits of improving the grid and where the grid can best be utilized for new things like microgrids and storage. One of the things that we hope to help is with FEMA support of utilities before and after storms. So right now, utilities don't have any data that shows how well their grid was operating before the storm, and now they'll be able to do that. But basically what we're doing is we're now in deployment. The grid is being evaluated in the city of Akron. Razor Lab is receiving our data through an AWS cloud-based system. And we hope very shortly that the way our data is helping utilities manage the grid will spread what we're doing across the nation. And we're looking forward to that opportunity as soon as our pilot concludes at the end of, or in the very beginning of 2021.
Hey, John, as we're waiting, maybe you could say a few words about your partnership with Razor, how you met, and what the benefits that that the BIRD program has brought to your company.
Sure. So actually, we were introduced to Razor by Andrea and her teams. The opportunity to work with a company that's focused at machine learning and artificial intelligence is a real boon, because we don't have to teach them about their work. We just have to help them understand how our data, what our data represents, and how we can use that data together. The opportunity to come right online with systems and architecture was a real plus. And with the way data is shared across clouds now, we're essentially linked together as one company. So it's been just a real opportunity.
Thank you.
That's the end of our video. And if you take that link, you'll be able to, maybe you could share it in chat. Everybody could hear as well as see the video.
Yes, it's currently in the chat. So if anyone wants to watch it on their own time, please view the chat function. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John, so much. Hopefully people have a chance to ask you questions afterwards. So now we're bringing in Yaakov from Razor Labs in Israel. Yaakov, can we hear you now?
So please let me know if you hear me well.
Perfect. Go ahead.
Excellent. So I had some technical difficulties with my internet, so I'm actually on my phone. It really translates the gap between us since I'm in Israel right now. Well, hello to everyone. Thank you to Andrea for the introduction of the project, and to John for his presentation, and to the organizers for the chance to speak in this event. I'd like to start by introducing Razor Labs. We are for our clients, intended to help them resolve business and operational challenges using our deep learning expertise, helping them harness the power of AI for ROI. That's the slogan we usually use. Next slide, please. So the types of projects we engage in are very diverse. This slide illustrates that if you take a single production line, just for an example, we can really help you gain different solutions in various potential problems. I'll focus on one, for example, safety issues in the workplace. We can use video analytics systems to help you receive alerts when workers are unsafe, too close to the machine, thus helping you really protect the health of your employees and obviously avoid accidents in the workplace. Next slide, please. In just a few years of operation, we were founded in 2016. We have already managed to complete over 65 different projects across different verticals and industries, and for a variety of clients from all over different industries, as shown in this slide. Next slide, please. We also have a strategic partnership with NVIDIA. We're a member of their exclusive partner program, one of only 30 partners worldwide, and the only ones from the Middle East and Australia. Next slide, please. So one of our main areas of expertise, the one relevant to the joint project with Exactly, the BIRD project, is actually predictive data analysis. John described the project in his presentation, so I'll focus briefly on our role in it. This is essentially the analytics part. We are tasked with building a system, a neural network, that will receive, intake the data from Exactor sensors that are now deployed around Akron, part of the pilot. We will also receive other data from external sources such as weather, load on the grid, environmental factors. And our system will actually be taking these inputs. It will be looking for different correlations in them between the various factors that are not evident to a human that we try to locate them in this data. The value of this is that in the end, using these correlations, our system would be able to output predictions about potential malfunctions in the electricity grid. So for example, we would be able to tell the user when a malfunction is expected to occur, where, and even what electric part might fail. So this obviously allows them to respond ahead of time, go to the location, change the necessary part, or act in any different way to prevent the potential malfunction, saving a lot of money and obviously allowing for a continuous electric supply, which is very socially important. Another thing that our system will be in charge of, what John mentioned, would be the health of the grid resiliency. Next slide, please. So the grid health is essentially a metric that we need to develop that will show how good the network is in a certain area or in designated or the entire designated region. So for example, it will be able to say that in a certain location, the system is not in good shape right now. And for example, this could help our users to make more informed decisions in their maintenance effort. And this is exactly the focus I mentioned before on predictive maintenance. Our systems will allow a user to understand beforehand where he should focus his effort. Now, this slide shows an illustration of how the system would look. But as John mentioned, one of the exciting parts of this project is actually the what if. So this could change based on the definition of the use cases and the input and the output that we'll actually decide on together with Exactor based on the potential business possibilities of the product. And this, for me, is a very exciting opportunity through this project. It's not something that we usually engage in. As I said, we usually work with clients, so the business case is defined for us. Here we have an opportunity to be involved in defining it. So these are different outputs that the system can provide. For example, the grid health, for example, a prediction into the future of potential malfunction, what the malfunctions are. But again, this is just an illustration to give you some taste of how this could look like in the end, not just in the, to ground it a bit. Next slide, please. The project John mentioned is currently in a very interesting stage because the sensors are now deployed in the field and they're sending us data. What you see in this slide is actually the data that we received from the sensors when it is plotted on a map. So each color represents a different sensor moving around Akron, and you see that their aggregation really covers the entire region it is supposed to. The joint, all the sensors together really cover the entire area. But it's essentially, if you will look closer at these routes, they're actually consisting of points that on the map. These points actually represent the fact that the sensors send us a reading once every second. And when you aggregate those, you actually see an entire route that looks exactly as though a car made it. And next slide, please. And in the end, what we're hoping to achieve is, that we will have this map where we will be able to locate points, areas where we think potential issues might occur. So the bigger the circles, the more based on the color mapping, these are points that are currently may be defined by us as points of interest. by using certain logics and an iterative process that we will use with Exactor in collaboration with Exactor, we will be able to turn these into potential predictions that we will give Exactor. Then they will be the agents on the field that will actually make sure that these represent real malfunctions or real potential malfunctions, send us this feedback, and through this process, we will be able to train our neural network to distinguish between real potential malfunctions and, well, let's say white noise in the data. So I hope this general explanation of our role and the current state of the project really helps you understand the potential value and the potential innovation that this project represents. To us, this project is really a unique possibility because this is an opportunity for us to join forces with another company that really flatters our abilities and completes them, because Exactor has their unique knowledge and proprietary sensor technology that really allows us to receive this initial possibility to actually receive the sensor readings and work with the data that could be translated into analytics. We are combining that with our own expertise in predictive maintenance models. This collaboration lets us actually envision such a system, lets us carry out such a project, which has the potential to, as I said before, has the potential to really affect lives, affect the economy, because it can save a lot of money. And in the end, we're really hoping that it might actually even become standard of the industry. One point I wanted to focus on is, for us, really the framework of BIRD really is part of what made this project possible for us, because as was mentioned earlier, BIRD were the ones that made the connection between us and Exactor, made the introduction based on I'm assuming based on the potential complementation between both of us. And indeed, as you can see from what we've shown, what we've told you, we are really in a very positive place in the project. It is moving along well. We're happy with it, and we're very happy, especially with our collaboration with Exactor. We really feel that the mutual work that we're doing is really fruitful to us. The work sessions we're having, at least on our side, I'm really feeling that we're gaining better knowledge and better understanding of Exactor's domain. We learn how to apply their knowledge into the system. This is very important when we're discussing a machine learning and deep learning system, because we need to understand the business in order to make a system that properly help us receive predictions, and give the right predictions and be properly applied. So I think I'm on the limit of my time. So please let me know if I have an additional minute, or would you prefer to ask me anything?
I have a quick question, both to you and John, before we get to Q&A for everybody, and some final remarks from Steve. Do you have any best practices for us, both not from the technical level, just from the communications level, about the partnership in general, and possibly today with what's going on with, I mean, you're working virtual a lot of the times regardless, because you're in different countries. This even more so. In general, do you have any best practices you can share?
Actually, the pandemic has set the framework for our collaboration, because we can't get together just because of the distances. We do every week meet on a Monday morning. We have a Monday morning review session, which is all hands on deck. We go through all problems, any concerns, any questions that each of the teams have, and then we go into a development meeting. And that development meeting is more focused at the data itself. I'll let Yakov address that more specifically. So it's really their meeting at Razor Lab on the second development meeting.
Yeah, on our end, just like John said, we're having these work meetings, weekly work meetings. Now, previously, these work meetings really focused on the data and the algorithmic part of the system. Now we're also having separate sessions with John where we're trying to define the actual system, define the user experience in the system, what would be included, what we will be able to produce within the scope of the project, which is very interesting. In terms of best practices, I think that one of the most important practices I can suggest in such a relationship, and I think it was really, in that sense, actually, the pandemic situation that forced us to work through video, in a sense, actually helped, because my impression is that when you have a collaboration between two companies, it's really easy to have differences in the vision and the plan that you're not even aware of. In that sense, when you work through a video session, when you can share documents with one another, when you can actually make a presentation as you go along, or make a document as you go along, it really helps you to align the vision of both sides and really move the project along in a more effective way. In our mutual work, John is constantly really making these useful presentations that are in the framework for discussions, and this is something that I would really suggest to anyone working in such a situation, which is use written communications, use written documents as a basis for moving along to understand that your visions align. One other thing that I think would be useful to such a project is that usually when you have two companies that are working from two different continents, it's easy for each company to take its own role, area of responsibility and just focus on that. I think one of my lessons from this project is it's very useful to have the other side also join in on this part, because they can have really useful input. We are receiving such input from Exactor. I really hope they were receiving similar input from us that were useful to them, that will be useful to them. So it's easy to use a really separate method where we each do our own. I would really recommend trying to incorporate the other party into your process, because you're working together, you're partners, and that would make the project a lot better. So this is my 2 cents on this.
Thank you, Yaakov. That's really interesting. That's really good input and good advice for all companies that are working together. At this point, I'm going to let Steve share some concluding remarks, and hopefully people can stay online for some Q&A. Steve.
Perfect. Thank you, Andrea. Just one quick wrap-up comment for both John and Yaakov. You guys were the perfect example of and Andrea, this is for you as well, for choosing them, of a industry trend that we're seeing in Israel that's good for Minnesota and frankly for the whole US, and that is that every sector is being touched by this connected devices trend. So my advice for all of you on this call is, if you are a connected devices or a company, there's opportunities in your future. And if you're not one of those companies, contact companies like John and Yaakov, because you need them to be on the cutting edge, because Israel's already on the cutting edge, and frankly we are too, but this is where the mutual opportunities are wonderful. So I love your example, gentlemen. Thank you both for presenting. So quick plug, in the few minutes we have left, we have 2 questions in the chat column. We'll get to those, but I want to mention that Minnesota is going back to Israel in 2021 to WATEC. I took some companies there in November, and honestly, one of the biggest, most interesting trends I saw at WATEC, half of the companies exhibiting at WATEC were connected devices companies that are supporting Israel's super advanced water sector. Plus, we have STEP grant funds. If you haven't heard of STEP, we'll tell you about that offline, but it's a way to help you manage the costs of getting to distant places like Israel and the cost of booth participation. So contact. We're going back in 2021. We're also going back to Biomed. My colleague Sarah will be happy to help you with that one. We've been there a couple iterations in a row. Unfortunately, it was shut down this past year because of COVID, but I'm sure it will be back. So hope you can join us for one of those 2 trade missions. Here's the perfect business plan. Apply for a bird grant, get it approved, and then join us at one of these 2 trade shows and meet your partner in Israel and be subsidized in 2 different directions. Be tough to beat, huh? So anyway, if you can pull it off, I'll buy you a beer. I hope you can make it happen. It'd be great. So that's it as far as our slides are concerned. I see a couple questions. So Andrea, this one is for you. This one comes from Daniel Stem. He says, quote, I have innovation development centers based in Minnesota that could perhaps consider bird engagement. In addition, I have innovation centers in Germany. Are there similar organizations to BIRD that could be engaged for Germany or EU-based projects?
Well, first, I'd be happy to have a conversation with him and talk about potential opportunities for his U.S. R&D entity and how they can work with companies in Israel. With regards to Germany and the EU, the Israel Innovation Authority has programs with other countries. You can just go onto their website, the Israel Innovation Authority, and you'll see they have a section for international cooperation, and he'll find some information there and certainly people to contact over at the Israel Innovation Authority, as well as Ariella. Ariella might be actually able to answer that question as well. He can also contact Ariella in the Midwest consulate, and they can also put them in touch with the people at the Israel Innovation Authority.
Meanwhile, Andrea, I see that Daniel, who asked the question, said he needed to get prepared for an 11 o'clock meeting. So he might have missed our reply, but we'll make sure that Daniel has every opportunity to talk directly to you, and if appropriate, also to the consulate in Chicago. We'll make sure he gets an answer to that question. And then we've got one more prepared question. If there's any others, send them our way. This is the only other one we have at the moment. Andrea, was Razor Lab, and forgive me if this one was answered by Yakov, maybe I missed it. Was Razor Lab already in your system looking for a project, or did you go out and find them for Exactor? And in a related question, what is the potential what is the pool of potential partners?
So that's a good question. So in this particular case, we did know Razor Labs. We've been in touch with Razor Labs. When our executive director, who's actually on this call in the background listening, as well as Bird's project manager for the Exactor Razor Labs project, Tal Kelem. But in this particular case, we knew Razor Labs. And we understood what Exactor was looking for, and were able to make that connection. But in general, each collaboration happens differently. We work with each company individually and try to help them to identify what would be their potential partners. It's a collaborative process. They typically know their technology and needs better than we do. But we provide them with information and we make those introductions. Israel is a very dynamic but small ecosystem, so it's not difficult to reach out to companies in Israel. And it's not that we have a database of Israeli companies waiting in line for a collaboration, but in general, Israeli companies, to go to market, they need to go outside of Israel. So most companies in Israel, given the right opportunity, would be interested at the very least in discussing a potential collaboration.
Great, thank you, Andrea. And you remind me of a comment I want to make, and that'll be my last one because we're coming up on 11 o'clock. And for those of you who have other questions, we'll just stay right here. But here's my comment. Yes, Israel's not a huge country. And Andrea already knows a lot of the companies in Israel, and those that she doesn't know, it's a short hop to someone in her network. So when you think about bird funding, don't think only about the money. Think about the partnership. Israeli companies have got a smaller domestic market than you. They want to help. They want to work with you so that the symbiosis could be pretty awesome. And the benefit of that partnership, how do you put a price on that? So if you're thinking about global business, working with savvy Israeli companies is in your interest. So it isn't just the dough, folks. It's also about the partnership. So think of that when you think about reaching out to Andrea. With that, I'm going to give Andrea the last word, and then we'll end the official event and see if we have any more questions. Andrea, any final thought?
My final thought is to thank Steve because he's so awesome and he's been such a great partner. And looking to see a lot of progress with companies in Minnesota and helping them to partner with companies in Israel and helping that move forward. So thanks to our companies. And I should say the same as well for Exactor and Razor Labs are probably one of my favorite collaborations. So thanks to all of them and everybody else for joining. And I'm here to answer any questions when anyone needs it. So thank you.
Fantastic. Then farewell to those of you who have to go. I'm going to stay right here and monitor the chat box for a couple more minutes to see if there is any more questions. And if they are not, then we will sign off and just wait for you to contact us. I'm hoping that Andrea's inbox will be filled after this meeting today with some more Minnesota companies. You got 49 states to compete with, so let's make sure Minnesota takes advantage. So thank you again, Andrea. Just hanging out. Right now, I don't see any more questions. If you don't mind, let's just hang here for another minute. And to John and Yakov, if you guys need to go, I also want to say thank you one more time for helping us.
I have, if you don't have a question, I have one more question for John and Yakov.
Okay.
One of the things that I like to see come out of Bird projects are the personal stories and the relationships. At the end of the day, projects succeed with Bird more than anything because of the relationships built, and projects fail for more than any other reason because of a relationship. So I'd be interested to know, even from John, have you learned anything about Israeli culture through your communications with the Razor Labs team?
Yeah, we have. It's interesting. There is a difference in culture. There's no question about that. And there's also a difference in number of vacation days. Seems like there's a lot of holidays in Israel, which it's something for us in the U.S. to get used to. But the beauty of our project was it was very exactor heavy at the beginning, and now it's Razor Lab heavy. So we had a nice transition period to learn about each other without impacting each other very much. So it's been a great relationship, and it's also fun just to see into everybody's home as they're on their Zoom meetings, to see the difference in how we outfit ourselves and how we entertain ourselves.
Terrific. Thank you, John. I do see a question, Andre. Okay, if I read one to you?
Of course.
All right. We have a question from Cheryl. She is a startup dental manufacturer making a portable dental unit that is more hardened against biofilm. So it sounds like a dental health technology. Any ideas for Bird funding for me? Thanks very much.
I would encourage her to get in touch with me so we can have a discussion. What I can say is there are a lot of companies in Israel that are doing work in the dental sector. Whether it relates to the device end, whether it relates to the materials end, as well as the diagnostics, different diagnostics technologies, anti-infection technologies. So there is a lot going on with that in that sector. So I'd be glad to explore that offline.
Okay, it sounds like Cheryl can just contact you. And if she doesn't have your email address, she can reach out through us. She adds a quick note. It's low-cost infrastructure mostly, but she does have some Linux-based software. I think that's what she intended to write. So anyway, she can continue the discussion with you.
Yeah, I think the important thing for her to think about is what is the complementary technology she would be looking for in a collaboration. And to understand what would bring her value to kind of complement the product or technology that she already has or is working on.
I'm glad you brought that up. We need to really emphasize that. If you are still asking yourself, well, how do I use Bird? It's that complementarity factor that's really big. Bird's not there to simply help you sell. Bird is there to help you partner with a compatible technology company so that you can both succeed. That kind of sums it up, at least as I understand it. I don't see any other questions. I do see a thank you from a fellow named Rich Kronfeld. Rich, we just met Rich the other day. If you haven't heard of Kronfeld Motors, check out their website. They make are you ready for this? A bicycle that goes 90 miles an hour. It looks more like a car, but it's basically a pedal-powered vehicle. Caught our eye for sure. We'll see if Rich reaches out to Bird or not. I hope that he does, but he's got something that I certainly hope we're seeing on the road in the future. Very cool. So Rich, thanks for your comment. Let's see. Then Andrea, that's it for the moment. And maybe that's a sign that it's time for us to sign off. So because folks can certainly reach out. Folks can get a hold of us. So on that note, I will say, Andrea, thank you again. This was great fun. I really enjoyed it. And I'm really hoping that inbox of yours is going to be totally swamped afterwards. And I'm happy to tune into any meetings too, to be a sounding board. There's a couple in the pipeline. I hope that will take off. So let's keep it going. Please consider BIRD as a pathway to finding a great partnership in Israel and doing global business. And think about the trade office as your partner for export growth as well in general. I and Sarah and my other colleagues will be happy to talk to you about the rest of the world, not just Israel too. So on that note, I am going to say farewell. Andrea, thank you again. Lahitraot. And we will talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks to everybody.
Pleasure. All righty.
Have a good evening in Israel and have a great rest of the day everywhere else. Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.